Welcome to the America250PA Start Here, America Did podcast, telling the unique stories that make up the diverse fabric of Pennsylvania.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to today's podcast. My name is Cassandra Coleman, and as the Executive Director of America250PA, I am thrilled to be hosting today's show. We have a real treat in store for us as we delve into the charming and sometimes hidden corners of Pennsylvania. Joining us today is an author widely known for his unique perspective and genuine passion for Pennsylvania, Rusty Glessner. Rusty isn't just the brains behind the famous and loved PA bucket list. He's a storyteller, a photographer, and above all, a true Pennsylvanian at heart. His adventures across Pennsylvania don't just capture the beauty of the landscapes, they breathe life into the heritage and pride of each destination, a quality that has resonated with his impressive following of over 277,000 on Facebook. Like many of you, and certainly like me, his followers are continuously in awe of the vivid imagery and fascinating insights that Rusty continues to share. In today's episode, we're going to explore the quirky and enchanting world of roadside attractions. These are not just stops along the road. They're snapshots of our culture, our history, and the playful spirit of Pennsylvania. Who better to guide us through these hidden gems than Rusty himself? So listen up, grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's embark on this journey together, discovering the stories and sights that make Pennsylvania an endlessly fascinating place to explore. So welcome, Rusty, and thank you so much for joining us in what promises to be a truly memorable episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I want to get started right away. I want you to really tell our listeners all about the moment and the inspiration that truly led to the creation of PA Bucket List. I mean, you have over 277,000 followers. So how did this get started?
I have been taking photos for many, many years and have always enjoyed sharing them on social media. And what I found was that so many people wanted to know where these places were and how they could go see them for themselves. So honestly, just as a hobby, I had the idea to start a website where I would share exactly that kind of information. You know, here's a waterfall, here's a roadside overlook, here's a historic monument, here's how to find it, here's a little bit of backstory about it. That's how it started, really just as a hobby. I had no idea it would explode into what it's become. In a nutshell, that's how it started. I just wanted to provide backstory to the photos that I was already sharing on social media. And there just seemed to be a big demand from people who want to go see things themselves, which, I can appreciate that because I'm the same way.
No, that's awesome. And I think, ultimately you took a passion you had, which photography, and you started to slowly share it. And then folks, of course, wanted more and more. And I'll be honest, I went and saw a lot of these roadside attractions as I've been traveling the Commonwealth, and it's awesome. And I wanted you to talk a little bit, just for our listeners who, I'm hoping that as we're talking, they're going on and they're checking out, PA Bucket List as we're live here. But ultimately, I'm sure as you started this and as it slowly started to grow, there were some highlights, there were some challenges. And as you started blogging about these roadside attractions, so talk to us a little bit about how we got to this point, what highlights you've experienced, what challenges you've experienced. And then if it's okay, we'll dive into some of those.
The biggest challenge for me was just how to present things in an organized fashion that would be easy for people to find the information they're looking for. I mean, when you look at a company like Google, who's one of the biggest companies in the world, the reason they're so big is because they simply found a way to sort and organize and make it easy to search information. So basically, I wanted to take the approach of how can I create a Pennsylvania specific search engine and organize things in a manner that would be easy for people to find the particular type of destination they're looking for, whether it's a roadside attraction, whether it's a museum, whether it's a historic site. And then further, I had to take into consideration that my audience primarily are viewing these blog posts on a phone. And a lot of times it's, it's a quick view. They're waiting for the bus, they're waiting for their Uber, they're at a doctor's office, they're standing in line at Walmart, whatever the case may be. So you really have to drill down and hit the bullet points. I'm not writing an extensive history of each particular site I write about. I'm trying to just give the highlights that can be digested in 60 seconds or less, basically. So that's the biggest challenge. It's certainly not, finding things to write about. I could write, about things for the rest of my life and not run out of things to write about. But it's how to present and organize them in a manner that's, useful to other people.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. And I think, ultimately you hit the nail on the head with saying you could write until, for the rest of your life. I think Pennsylvania has so much to highlight, and the history and the culture and the heritage and just the fun, right? All across all 67 counties. It's amazing. So now as we start to embark on some of these roadside attractions, let's dream of interstellar travel and experience cosmic adventure right here in Pennsylvania. Yes, you heard that right. In the charming town of Mars, we find a celestial surprise, our very own Mars UFO. And this isn't just a nod to the town's name, it's a full-fledged extraterrestrial experience. So for our first stop, we are landing in Mars to explore this out-of-world site. Rusty, when you wrote the story behind the creation of the Mars UFO, talk to our listeners a little bit about that.
So the Mars UFO literally looks like a UFO landed in the town square in Mars, Pennsylvania, out in Butler County. It was built in the early 1990s. I guess it was built from a few oil drums that were cut down and reshaped by a local artist to resemble a UFO. I like to think back on what was going on in the 1990s. The X-Files had just come onto the scene and was a big deal on television at that time. So I think there was a resurgent interest in UFOs at that time. I have not spoken to the artist personally that created it, so I can't confirm that, but that's my suspicion, is that in part the UFO in Mars came apart. The flying saucer was partially inspired by the X-Files, but the name of the town obviously goes back hundreds of years before UFOs.
Well, and I think too, the background on that and visiting that site, I know when I was there, folks were lined up to take photos. So I think folks definitely go and find this and want to document, their visit. And I'm sure, of course, you have memorable experiences from when you visit all of these different locations. Anything that sticks out when you first visited the Mars UFO?
I don't know about the first time I was just like, wow, that's pretty quirky. But I've been there several times, passing through. I kind of make a point to detour if I'm in the area. And I was there recently this summer, and it was, a driving rain. I pulled up, to park. I'm like, I'm not getting out to take a picture. It's, a downpour. But someone else pulled up Texas license plates, I believe. They jumped out, ran up to the UFO. They were taking pictures. So it's interesting to me how literally people from around the country come there. And I'm sure because of social media and maybe because of my blog posts, but it's definitely a spot where people want to get that Instagram photo.
The local community embraces it, which is always a positive thing as well. So, it's really great to see that.
Yeah. They've got, Planet Pizza. I saw a local car dealer there has cars from Mars. Yep. The school is the Fighting Planets. So yeah, they're all in on the Mars and the flying saucer and the alien motif.
No, that's awesome. And let's move on to stop number 2, which is the Sherman Memorial Lighthouse, a beautiful spot overlooking the Allegheny River. So what ultimately makes this lighthouse a roadside attraction?
Well, for starters, it is the largest lighthouse in Pennsylvania. The 3 that are at Lake Erie are dwarfed by this one. It's, it's literally twice as tall as a couple of the lighthouses at Erie. But just the novelty of it. It's a landlocked essentially lighthouse. It serves no navigational purpose per se on the Allegheny River, but it's definitely quite a sight.
Yeah. And I think something that really stood out to me when I visited there was the park that was like built around it, which I think is really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So before the park, the entire site was actually a quarry. And the family, the Shermans, operated that quarry off of that island there in the Allegheny River, prior to the formation of the park. So when they sold the company, they then turned the island into this Peace Park, of which the Sherman Memorial Lighthouse is part of. But yeah, it has a pretty extensive history, similar to when you go to Pittsburgh to the Point. I mean, at one point, the Point was a total, I don't want to say industrial wasteland, but it looked far different than it looks today. And that's the same with Peace Park. It's it went from industrial site to this beautiful park now. And like you mentioned, that aside from the lighthouse, there's a model of the Statue of Liberty, a replica of the Liberty Bell. So there's a lot to see there.
Same thing with this site as with the UFO. There were folks, there taking photos. And again, the majority of them were out-of-state plates. So I think that's, again, it's really interesting to see the amount of folks and tourists who come into Pennsylvania for some of these really fun type of experiences.
Yeah, I think, you really can't, in this day and age, underestimate the power of social media to get the word out there to people traveling from all over the country that are interested in seeing the biggest this or the quirkiest that. So yeah, definitely lots of out of state people are perhaps more familiar with these things than they would have been 10, 15 years ago.
So let's leave the beauty of the Sherman Memorial Lighthouse and let's have our journey take us deliciously down the road, right? Next up, we're diving into a slice of Americana that's as tasty as the iconic Big Mac Museum. It's a celebration of one of the world's most famous sandwiches right here in Pennsylvania. And imagine walking into a space dedicated to the history, the creation, and the global impact of the Big Mac. It's a unique blend of fast food culture and history that you won't find anywhere else. So Rusty, this is another one actually that I had the opportunity to visit. And let's start kind of with the foundation of this exhibit. And can you share with us the origins of the Big Mac Museum and how this tribute to a fast food legend came to be in Pennsylvania?
Right. So the Big Mac was actually born in Uniontown, which is about 40 miles south of Irwin, where the museum is located. Jim Delegati, he was a McDonald's franchise owner, came up with the concept of the Big Mac in 1967. It took off from there. And on the 40th anniversary of the birth of the Big Mac, his family, who now own 18 McDonald's in the area, decided to open this Big Mac Museum. And they decided on the Irwin location because it's a busier, more visible location than Uniontown. So the Irwin one is literally right off the Irwin exit of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. So, that's in a nutshell, that's the how it came to be.
And I have to say, during my visit there, I couldn't visit without grabbing some fries and a Coke and, sitting there and getting the photo with the Big Mac behind me. So it was a really cool experience to do that.
Yeah. It's an actual working McDonald's. Like it's not just a museum. So, that alone is kind of interesting.
Yeah. That's what I thought was really, really cool was the fact, like you mentioned, that there were customers there purchasing their lunch, and there were folks there wanting to go into the exhibit part. So it was really interesting.
Right.
Let's now move to South Central Pennsylvania, and let's conjure up an image that's as whimsical as it is real. Picture a colossal white shoe, about 25 feet high, 17 feet wide, 8 feet long, complete with a front door, stained glass windows, and even a hot tub. We're talking about the iconic Haines Shoe House in Hellam Township. This place sounds like it's straight out of a fairy tale. Can you tell us why the Haines Shoe House was built and what the original purpose behind the extraordinary structure is?
Yeah, so it was originally built as a marketing gimmick. The owner of the Haines Shoe Company he was a self-made millionaire. I understood the value of good marketing. And after seeing a similar large house in California, I believe it was, when he came back to Pennsylvania, he went to an architect and said, I want to build a model of a boot that can be a house. And so they kind of hashed it out. But originally that's how it came to be. He understood that if he could offer people free stays at this house, the media would pick up on it. The word of mouth would travel, and his brand would be further enhanced by this house. So that's how it came to be. Through the years, it's been a honeymoon retreat. It's been a museum. At one point, it was an ice cream parlor, and now it's a vacation rental.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Stepping into the Haines Shoe House was a really cool experience. This is another one that I did have the opportunity to visit. And I think, seeing too, I think there's like a little gift shop as part of this as well, if I recall. And there any like particular, because again, you've been doing this a while. You've seen a lot of these different attractions. Anything in particular, any aspects or details that had stood out to you when you visited this specific attraction?
I would say it's all the little details. I mean, literally, like every window has a stained glass shoe motif. So many of the architectural details, the way they incorporated some sort of shoe theme into it, is just really, really creative. And in its current iteration as a vacation rental, the entire basement, which at one point was the garage of the house, but it's basically been retrofitted as a sort of a modern living room, but also it's a mini museum to the Haines and Haines shoes. So there's a lot of interesting artifacts and photos and little stories about people who stayed there in the 50s, and so it's neat. I mean, it's a museum where you can spend the night. So that's I was fortunate. I was able to spend 2 nights there right after it converted over to a vacation rental. So
that's awesome. And what an experience.
I got to do a deep dive into I got to explore all the little museum exhibits and read everything. And very, very neat.
That's really, really cool. And I know, with even the last couple we discussed, we talked about the community and the community embracing, these attractions and the visitors. And, do you think that the Haines Shoe House holds any, importance for Hellam Township?
Oh, absolutely. Right down to the road signs. I mean, all of the road signs in the township have little images of the shoe house on them. So they've clearly embraced that. But yeah, I mean, it definitely brings, even if it's just people driving by, stopping on the road, snap some pictures, they get a bump in tourism and notoriety from having the shoe house there. Well,
and Rusty, for our final step today, we are heading to a landmark that symbolizes both nostalgia and curiosity, the Bedford Coffee Pot. And I'd love for you to kind of tell us what the story behind this unique attraction is and how it's been preserved over the years. And full disclosure, this is not one that I've actually been to. It's on my list, but I have not actually visited this one yet. So I'm really curious to hear your take on this.
So it was built in 1927 as a gimmick to entice motorists to stop at a service station for food and fuel. I mean, this was right in the early stages of the Lincoln Highway, the first transcontinental highway in America. And at that time, business owners, especially gas station owners, were vying to compete against one another to get motorists to stop at their particular business to get food and fuel. So this gentleman, David Kuntz, built it. He had the idea of, hey, let's build a giant coffee pot and sell coffee out of it. So that's how it got its start. Over the years, then it developed into, at one point, it was a bar with a hotel behind it. And then in the 80s and early 90s, it really fell into disrepair. And then, fortunately, it was rescued, moved across the street to where it's located now at the Bedford County Fair entrance, and rehabilitated.
That's awesome. And I hear too that you have roots in Bedford. So did the Bedford Coffee Pot mean anything to you growing up?
I mean, growing up in my youth, I mean, that was during the time period where it really had fallen into disrepair.
Okay.
So I was familiar with driving by it. But when it moved, and that's been 20 years now, it moved in 2004 across the street from where it was originally built to the entrance to the Bedford County Fair. As a family, typically go to the Bedford Fair every year. And so it's been neat. I have a teenage daughter. So for her to have, to be able to experience it every year, and it's tied to her memories of going to the Bedford County Fair. I mean, that's a neat thing.
I'm sure it's neat too for you to see something that did fall into disrepair being preserved and now being a part, as you mentioned, of your daughter's, memories.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's really cool.
To me, that probably best personifies, what the whole roadside attraction / marketing gimmick era of the Lincoln Highway entailed. I mean, that was the perfect example of someone trying to think outside the box. Okay, how can we, before social media, before any type of extensive print advertising, how do we get people to want to pull over here, gas up their car and buy a sandwich and a cup of coffee? So, yeah.
Well, Rusty, as we conclude our journey today, I just want to ask you, what thoughts or message would you like to leave with our listeners about Pennsylvania's rich cultural history?
I would just encourage everyone to go out and explore the state. There's so much here, and that's what I try and do through my website. I try and get people enthusiastic and curious about what all there is to see. Hopefully I'm accomplishing that with my website.
And Rusty, I don't think it's hopefully, I think you are. So thank you for all of the work that you do. And thank you for bringing, the attention and the spotlight to these unique and quirky and fun attractions that, again, not only Pennsylvanians should get out and want to see and want to learn about, but that folks from across the country want to come and learn about that specific site or attraction that is important to each individual community, across the Commonwealth. So I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Rusty Glessner for joining us today and sharing his extraordinary experiences and insights.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
You've reminded us that every corner of Pennsylvania, including the one with a house made of a shoe, is deserving of exploration and cultural and historical appreciation. And to our listeners, we'd love to hear about your own roadside discoveries. Share your stories with us on our social media and continue following Rusty's adventures through the PA bucket list. Thank you for tuning in. I hope today's episode has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to embark on your own adventures, discovering the quirky, the beautiful, and the historic treasures that lie just off the beaten path. Remember that every journey starts with a single step, and there is a whole road of wonders waiting for you. I'm Cassandra Coleman, and I'm signing off for now and encouraging you to keep celebrating the unique spirit of your county and of our Commonwealth. Until next time, happy explorations.
This has been the America250PA Start Here, America Did podcast, produced by Commonwealth Media Services. Stay tuned for more epic Pennsylvania stories at America250PA.org.